The crystal chandelier cast diamonds of light across the opulent ballroom as Eleanor Rhodes stood frozen in the doorway, her heart hammering against her ribs. Everyone's eyes were on her, the uninvited, unwelcome guest at the engagement party of the year. She could feel their stares burning into her dark skin, their whispers growing louder as recognition dawned on their faces. Across the room, standing beside his perfectly selected society bride-to-be, was Jackson Montgomery, heir to the Montgomery billions and the man Eleanor had secretly loved for the past year. Their eyes met across the sea of black ties and designer gowns. His face paled, his champagne glass nearly slipping from his fingers. His fiancée, Vivian Preston, with her flawless blonde hair and impeccable pedigree, followed his gaze, and her perfectly painted lips thinned into a line of displeasure. Eleanor hadn't planned to come here tonight. She had promised herself she would respect his decision, except that their worlds were too different, and that his family obligations would always come before what they had shared. But then she had received the news that morning, news that changed everything, and she knew she couldn't let him go through with this charade of a marriage without knowing the truth. "Security," Jackson's mother hissed to a nearby staff member, her diamond earrings catching the light as she tilted her head toward Eleanor. "Remove that woman immediately." Two men in dark suits began moving toward her. Eleanor clutched her small purse tighter, feeling the weight of the envelope inside the envelope, containing the proof that would either bring her and Jackson together or tear them apart forever. As the security guards approached, Jackson suddenly broke away from his fiancée's grip, striding purposefully across the ballroom floor, his expression unreadable. The crowd parted before him like the Red Sea, all eyes darting between the billionaire heir and the black woman who dared to disrupt the most significant social event of the season. "Eleanor," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent room, "what are you doing here?" This was it, the moment that would change both their lives. Eleanor took a deep breath and met his gaze directly. "I need to talk to you, Jackson. It's important." His mother appeared at his side, her face tight with anger. "Jackson, this is completely inappropriate." "Give us a minute," Jackson said, not taking his eyes off Eleanor. "I will not have this. This person ruin your engagement party," his mother hissed. Jackson's jaw tightened. "Mother, please." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Cameras flashed as society photographers captured what was quickly becoming the scandal of the year. Eleanor saw the pain and confusion in Jackson's eyes, and for a moment she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake by coming here. But there was no turning back now. She had to tell him the truth, no matter the consequences. What no one in that glittering ballroom knew was that Eleanor and Jackson shared a past far deeper than anyone suspected, and what Eleanor carried in her purse would force Jackson to make a choice that would either fulfill his family's dynastic dreams or follow his heart into uncharted territory. As they stood facing each other in that charged moment, neither of them realized just how much was truly at stake, not just for them, but for the future of the Montgomery Empire itself. 1 year earlier, Eleanor Rhodes pushed her cart through the crowded grocery store, mentally tallying the cost of each item she placed inside. As a financial advisor at her small local firm, she knew how to budget, but it still required careful planning since she was helping her younger sister through college. As she reached for a box of cereal, her cart collided with another. "I'm so sorry," she said automatically, looking up into the most piercing blue eyes she had ever seen. The man was tall, dressed casually in a simple white button-down and jeans that Eleanor could tell cost more than her entire outfit. He smiled, and something about it seemed both genuine and guarded. "Entirely my fault," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I wasn't watching where I was going." Their hands touched briefly as they both moved to straighten their carts, and Eleanor felt an unexpected spark of electricity between them. She quickly withdrew her hand, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "Are you new to the area?" she asked, noticing his slight confusion as he looked around the store. This neighborhood was predominantly middle class, and this man, whoever he was, he hesitated before answering. "Just passing through. I'm exploring different neighborhoods." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "For fun?" He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his serious face. "Let's just say I'm trying to get out of my bubble." Something about his honesty made her smile. "Well, if you want an authentic local experience, skip the pre-made sandwiches they sell here. There's a deli 2 blocks down that makes the best pastrami you'll ever taste." "Is that so?" He seemed genuinely interested. "Maybe you could show me sometime?" The question caught Eleanor off guard. Was this gorgeous stranger asking her out? She studied him more carefully. No wedding ring, but that didn't mean much these days. And there was something almost too perfect about him, as if he had stepped out of a magazine rather than real life. "I don't even know your name," she said cautiously. "Jack," he replied, extending his hand. "Jack Moore." Eleanor took his hand, noting his firm handshake. "Eleanor Rhodes." "Beautiful name," he said. "So, about that deli?" Against her better judgment, Eleanor found herself agreeing to meet him for lunch the next day. As she watched him walk away, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Jack Moore than he was letting on. What Eleanor didn't know then was that Jack Moore was actually Jackson Montgomery, who had slipped away from his driver and security detail for a rare moment of normalcy. The Montgomery name was associated with banks, real estate holdings, and technology investments across the globe. Jackson had been groomed since birth to take over the family empire. But lately, he had been feeling suffocated by the expectations placed upon him. Their lunch the next day turned into dinner the following week. Jackson maintained his Jack Moore persona, telling Eleanor he worked in finance, which wasn't entirely untrue, but keeping the magnitude of his wealth and status hidden. With Eleanor, he could just be himself, not the Montgomery heir with the weight of a dynasty on his shoulders. Eleanor found herself drawn to Jack's intelligence and his genuine interest in her life. Unlike most men she had dated, he asked questions about her work, her family, her dreams, and actually listened to her answers. There was an intensity to him that both intrigued and slightly unnerved her, as if he was memorizing everything about her, savoring each moment they spent together. By their 5th date, Jackson knew he was in dangerous territory. He was falling for Eleanor, her sharp mind, her warmth, her unwavering determination to care for her family, but he was living a lie. The longer he maintained his false identity, the harder it would be to tell her the truth. Yet he couldn't bring himself to end things, not when being with her was the only time he felt truly alive. Eleanor, too, was falling in love, though she tried to keep her guard up. There were moments when Jack seemed distant. Sometimes he would receive calls that he would step away to answer, his voice dropping to a whisper. He never invited her to his place, always meeting at restaurants or her modest apartment. She sensed there was something he wasn't telling her, but the connection between them felt too rare to walk away from. Their relationship deepened over the following months, both physically and emotionally. Jackson found reasons to extend his business trips to Eleanor's city, stealing days and sometimes weeks away from his responsibilities to be with her. In her arms, in her small, cozy apartment, he found a peace he had never known in his privileged. But reality couldn't be held at bay forever. One evening, as they lay tangled together in Eleanor's bed, her head resting on his chest, Jackson knew it was time to come clean. The Montgomery Technologies' annual charity gala was approaching, an event he couldn't miss, and his mother had been introducing him to eligible socialites, hinting strongly that at 32, it was time he settled down with an appropriate partner who could help further the family's interests. Eleanor, he said softly, stroking her hair. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. I knew this was coming, she said quietly. You're married, aren't you? Jackson sat up, shocked. No, God, no. It's not that. It's... He took a deep breath. My name isn't Jack Moore. It's Jackson Montgomery. Eleanor stared at him blankly for a moment before recognition dawned in her eyes. Montgomery? As in Montgomery Technologies? The Montgomery building downtown? He nodded, watching her face carefully. I'm sorry I lied to you. I just wanted to know what it was like to be normal, to have someone see me for who I am, not what I'm worth. Eleanor sat up fully now, pulling the sheet around her, creating a barrier between them. So our entire relationship has been built on a lie? Her voice was calm, but he could hear the hurt beneath it. Not the important parts, Jackson insisted, reaching for her hand. Everything between us, what we feel for each other, that's real, more real than anything in my life. Why tell me now? She asked, not pulling her hand away but not fully accepting his touch either. Jackson swallowed hard. Because I love you, Eleanor, and I want you to be part of my real life, not just this bubble we've created. The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor's mind raced with implications. She had fallen in love with Jack Moore, a seemingly ordinary man with a good job. Jackson Montgomery was from another world entirely, a world of unimaginable wealth, privilege, and, she suspected, your family, she said slowly. Do they know about me? Jackson's hesitation told her everything she needed to know. They don't even know I've been coming here, he admitted. They think I've been in Europe, overseeing our operations there. Eleanor pulled her hand away now, hurt and anger rising within her. So I'm your dirty little secret? The black girl from the wrong side of town you have fun with when you're slumming it? No. Jackson moved closer, his eyes pleading. It's not like that. I needed to figure out what this was between us before I brought you into that world. My family. They have certain expectations. Expectations that don't include someone like me. Eleanor finished for him. Jackson couldn't deny it. The Montgomerys had maintained their position at the top of society for generations by making strategic marriages and business alliances. His father had explicitly told him since childhood that his choice of wife would be as much a business decision as a personal one. I don't care what they think, he said finally. I love you. I want to be with you. Eleanor wanted to believe him. The past months had been the happiest of her life, but now she was forced to see their relationship through a new lens. Had she been naive to think they could build something lasting? Was what they had strong enough to withstand the pressure of his world? I need time to think, she said, slipping out of bed and reaching for her robe. This is a lot to process, Jackson. He winced at the formal use of his full name. I understand, but please believe me when I say my feelings for you are real. Eleanor nodded, not trusting herself to speak further. As she watched him dress and prepare to leave, she wondered if this was the beginning of the end or the start of something new and infinitely more complicated. What she didn't know was that their challenges were just beginning. The Montgomery estate sprawled across 50 acres of prime real estate outside the city. The main house, a Georgian-style mansion that had been in the family for 4 generations, stood as a testament to old money and enduring power. Jackson sat in his father's study, a glass of scotch in his hand, trying to maintain his composure as Robert Montgomery explained, yet again, why the Preston merger was crucial to their future. Vivian Preston is the perfect match, son, Robert said, leaning back in his leather chair. At 65, he remained an imposing figure, his silver hair and piercing blue eyes so like Jackson's own, reflecting a lifetime of making tough decisions that had expanded the family fortune. Her father's tech patents, combined with our manufacturing capabilities, will put us years ahead of the competition. I understand the business angle, father, Jackson replied, trying to keep the frustration from his voice. But marriage is about more than strategic alliances. At least, it should be. Robert's eyes narrowed. Is this about that woman you've been seeing? Your mother's had you followed, you know. Jackson felt a surge of anger. Had me followed? I'm 32 years old, not 16. You're also the heir to an empire worth billions, Robert countered calmly. Your choices affect more than just you. They affect thousands of employees, shareholders, and the family legacy. And what exactly did your spy report back? Jackson asked, his voice tight. Robert took a sip of his scotch before answering. That you've been spending time with a woman named Eleanor Rhodes, mid-20s, works at a small financial firm, lives in an apartment in a modest neighborhood. He paused. African-American. The way his father said those last two words, with such careful neutrality, told Jackson everything he needed to know about the family's perspective. Eleanor is brilliant, kind, and hard-working, Jackson said firmly. And yes, she's black. Does that matter? Don't try to paint me as a racist, Jackson, Robert said sharply. This isn't about her race. It's about suitability. Does she understand our world? The responsibilities you bear? The scrutiny you'll face? Has she been groomed to handle the social obligations that come with being a Montgomery? Maybe our world could use some fresh perspective, Jackson countered. Eleanor sees things differently. She challenges me. I'm sure she's a lovely girl. Robert's tone softened slightly. But be realistic. The Prestons are offering an alliance that will secure our position for decades to come. Vivian has been raised in our circle. She understands the game. That's just it. Jackson set down his glass harder than he intended. I don't want my life to be a game. Robert stood, signaling the end of the conversation. You have responsibilities, Jackson, to this family, to our legacy. I suggest you think very carefully about what truly matters. As Jackson left his father's study, he found his mother waiting in the hallway, clearly having overheard at least part of the conversation. Victoria Montgomery was a formidable woman who had successfully navigated high society for decades. Her charity work was legendary, though Jackson had long suspected it was motivated more by social standing than genuine compassion. Your father means well, she said, linking her arm through his as they walked toward the grand staircase. We both want what's best for you. What's best for me, or what's best for the Montgomery name? Jackson asked. Victoria sighed dramatically. They're one and the same, darling. Always have been. She paused at the foot of the stairs. I've arranged for you to accompany Vivian to the Harrington benefit next week. She's quite excited about it. Jackson stopped, turning to face his mother directly. I haven't agreed to this arrangement, Mother. Victoria's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened slightly. Just get to know her, Jackson. Vivian is lovely, beautiful, accomplished, from an excellent family. What more could you want? Love, Jackson thought. Connection. Someone who sees me, not my bank account. But he knew his mother wouldn't understand. I'll think about it, he said finally, knowing it was easier than arguing. Victoria patted his cheek. That's all I ask. But they both knew she was expecting much more than that. Later that night, alone in his wing of the mansion, Jackson called Eleanor. They hadn't spoken much since his revelation about his true identity, and he missed her desperately. I've been thinking about you, he said when she answered, relieved that she had picked up. I've been thinking about you too, Eleanor replied, her voice guarded. Have you told your family about us yet? Jackson hesitated, and in that moment of silence, Eleanor had her answer. I see, she said quietly. It's complicated, Jackson tried to explain. My father is pushing for this business merger that involves me potentially dating the daughter of his business partner. Dating, Eleanor repeated flatly. So while you're telling me you love me, your family is setting you up with someone else? I don't want her, Jackson insisted. I want you. I just need time to make them understand. Understand what exactly? That you're in love with a black woman who doesn't come with business patents or social connections? How long do you think that will take, Jackson? Weeks? Months? Years? Her words cut him deeply, because he knew there was truth in them. His family wouldn't easily accept Eleanor, not because they were overtly racist, but because she didn't fit into their carefully constructed world. "I'll make them see," he promised. "Just don't give up on us yet." There was a long pause before Eleanor spoke again. "I love you, Jackson, but I won't be your secret." After they hung up, Jackson stared at the ceiling of his bedroom, the same room where he had slept as a child, surrounded by privilege and expectations. For the first time, the vastness of the estate felt not like a symbol of success, but like a prison. Meanwhile, Eleanor sat in her apartment, tears streaming down her face. She had always prided herself on being practical, on making smart decisions. Falling in love with Jackson Montgomery was neither practical nor smart. Yet here she was, her heart breaking over a man who lived in a world that would never fully accept her. She knew she should end it now, before she got hurt even more. But the thought of never seeing him again, never feeling his arms around her, never sharing her thoughts and dreams with the one person who seemed to truly understand her. Both Jackson and Eleanor faced the same question that night, from opposite sides of the city and opposite ends of the social spectrum. Was their love strong enough to bridge the chasm between their worlds? The perfect bride. Vivian Preston was indeed perfect on paper. The daughter of tech innovator Harold Preston, she had graduated with honors from an Ivy League university, served on multiple charity boards, and possessed the kind of classic beauty that photographed well for society pages. When Jackson reluctantly agreed to escort her to the Harrington benefit, he found her intelligent and poised. She knew exactly who to talk to, what to say, and how to make Jackson look good. It was like watching a masterclass in high society navigation. "Your mother tells me you're interested in expanding into sustainable technologies," Vivian said as they sipped champagne at their table. "Daddy's been working on some fascinating solar applications that might interest you." Jackson nodded, trying to focus on the conversation despite his mind constantly drifting to Eleanor. "That does sound interesting. I'd like to hear more about it." Vivian smiled, touching his arm lightly. "Perhaps over dinner sometime? Just the two of us?" Before Jackson could formulate a polite refusal, his mother appeared, beaming at the sight of them together. "You two make such a handsome couple," Victoria gushed. "Vivian, that dress is absolutely stunning on you." "Thank you, Mrs. Montgomery," Vivian replied graciously. "I was just telling Jackson about Daddy's new solar technology." "Brilliant and beautiful," Victoria said approvingly. "Jackson, why don't you take Vivian for a turn around the dance floor? The Richardsons are watching, and you know how they love to gossip." Trapped, Jackson led Vivian to the dance floor, hyper-aware of the eyes following them. This was exactly the kind of public display his parents had hoped for the heir to the Montgomery fortune paired with the Preston heiress, a merger of power and influence on full display. As they danced, Vivian fit perfectly in his arms, her movements graceful and practiced. She knew all the right steps, just as she knew all the right things to say. But Jackson felt nothing, no spark, no connection, no desire to know her thoughts beyond the carefully curated responses she provided. "We make sense together, you know," Vivian said softly, looking up at him with calculation behind her smile. "Our families, our backgrounds, our goals, we could build something remarkable." Jackson looked down at her, seeing not a woman but a business proposition. "And is that what you want, Vivian? A merger rather than a marriage?" If his bluntness offended her, she didn't show it. "I want a partner who understands this world, Jackson. Someone who won't be scandalized by its rules or expectations. Don't you want the same?" The question lingered between them as the music ended. Jackson escorted Vivian back to their table, his mind in turmoil. Maybe she was right. Maybe someone like Eleanor, with her straightforward approach to life and her outsider's perspective, would never truly fit into his world. Maybe it would be kinder to let her go now, before she was hurt by the harsh realities of high society. But the thought of never seeing Eleanor again, never hearing her laugh or feeling her touch, created a physical ache in his chest. Over the next few weeks, Jackson found himself being pushed ever closer to Vivian. Their families arranged dinners, charity events, and casual meetings that were anything but. Harold Preston made no secret of his enthusiasm for a potential match, bringing Jackson into business meetings and treating him almost like a son-in-law already. The media picked up on the narrative, dubbing them America's Golden Couple and speculating about wedding dates and venues. Jackson's face appeared on business magazines alongside Vivian's, their theoretical union presented as the next great American dynasty. Through it all, Jackson maintained his contact with Eleanor, though their conversations grew more strained. He couldn't bring himself to tell her about Vivian, about the expectations building around him like a tidal wave threatening to sweep away his free will. Eleanor, however, was not oblivious. One evening, as they shared a rare dinner at her apartment, she placed a tabloid on the table between them. On the cover was a photo of Jackson and Vivian entering a gala, his hand at the small of her back, both of them smiling for the cameras. "Who is she?" Eleanor asked quietly. Jackson closed his eyes briefly, the moment he had been dreading finally upon him. "Vivian Preston. Her father is a business associate of my family's." "And more than that, it seems," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "It's not what you think," Jackson began, but Eleanor cut him off. "Then what is it, Jackson? Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're living two separate lives. One with me, hidden away from the public eye, and another with her. My family has expectations." "So you've said," Eleanor interrupted, "for months now. And I've been patient, waiting for you to stand up to them, to choose what you want rather than what they want for you. But I'm beginning to think you don't know the difference anymore." Her words struck at the heart of Jackson's conflict. Did he know what he truly wanted? He loved Eleanor, but was that enough to walk away from everything he had been raised to value? "I need time," he said finally. Eleanor stood, gathering the dishes from their half-finished meal. "Time is the one thing I can't give you anymore, Jackson. I won't be the other woman, hidden away while you parade around with your perfect society bride. I deserve better than that." "What are you saying?" Jackson asked, though he already knew the answer. Eleanor turned to face him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm saying goodbye. I love you, and I won't diminish myself by accepting scraps of your life when I deserve the whole thing." That night, as Jackson returned to his empty penthouse, he felt a hollowness, unlike anything he had ever experienced. Eleanor had been right to end things. He had been unfair to her, unwilling to make the difficult choice, hoping somehow that both worlds could coexist without colliding. In the weeks that followed, Jackson threw himself into work, accepting his family's plans with a numb resignation. He took Vivian to events, discussed business with her father, and allowed his mother to drop hints about ring designs and suitable wedding venues. The Preston merger moved forward, with preliminary papers drawn up that would unite the two companies upon the marriage of their children. The business world applauded the strategic alliance, and society columnists speculated about what would surely be the wedding of the decade. Only Jackson's sister, Emma, saw through his facade. "You're miserable," she stated bluntly one afternoon as they sat in the garden of the family estate. At 28, Emma had always been the rebel of the family, choosing to pursue a career in environmental law rather than join the family business. "I'm fine," Jackson replied automatically. Emma snorted. "Please, You look like you're attending your own funeral every time Vivian's name is mentioned. What happened to the woman you were seeing? The one that had you sneaking around like a teenager." Jackson had never explicitly told Emma about Eleanor, but little escaped his sister's notice. "It's over," he said shortly. "Because you ended it? Or because you let Mother and Father railroad you into this ridiculous arrangement with Vivian?" Emma pressed. "It's not ridiculous," Jackson defended weakly. "The Preston alliance makes good business sense." "So does selling your soul to the devil if the price is right," Emma retorted. "But that doesn't make it a good idea." She leaned forward, her expression softening. "Look, Jack, I know how hard it is to stand up to them. God knows I've done it enough times. But this is your life we're talking about, your future. Don't you think you deserve to be happy?" Did he? Jackson had been raised to believe that duty came before personal happiness, that the Montgomery legacy was bigger than any individual desire. But lately, he had begun to question that premise. What was the point of all this wealth and power if it couldn't buy him the freedom to love whom he chose? "It's complicated," he said finally. Emma stood, brushing off her jeans. "It's really not. You either love this woman enough to fight for her, or you don't. Everything else is just noise." As Emma walked away, her words echoed in Jackson's mind. She was right, of course. Beneath all the family pressure and business considerations lay a simple truth. He had never stopped loving her, and if he didn't act soon, he would lose her forever. That evening, Jackson made his decision. He would break things off with Vivian, tell his parents the truth, and go to Eleanor to beg for another chance. It wouldn't be easy, the fallout would be tremendous, both personally and professionally, but it was the only path that offered any hope of true happiness. But before he could put his plan into action, fate intervened in the form of an unexpected phone call that would change everything. The unexpected turn. Eleanor stared at the doctor, trying to process the words she had just heard. "Pregnant? You're sure?" Dr. Wilson nodded, her expression kind. "About 8 weeks, based on your last period and the ultrasound measurements. Congratulations." Congratulations. The word seemed surreal. Eleanor had always wanted children someday, but not like this, not alone. Still nursing a broken heart over a man who had chosen his family's expectations over their love. As she left the doctor's office, Eleanor's mind raced with implications. Jackson was the father, there had been no one else since they met, but did he have a right to know? He was likely planning his wedding to Vivian Preston by now, preparing to create the perfect dynasty his family had mapped out for him. Would telling him about the baby just complicate things? Or did he deserve to know regardless of what he had chosen? For days, Eleanor agonized over the decision. She called her sister Maya, the only person who knew the full truth about her relationship with Jackson. "You have to tell him," Maya insisted during their late-night call. "Whatever he decided about your relationship, this baby is half his. He has a right to know." "And then what?" Eleanor asked, rubbing her still flat stomach. "He marries his perfect society bride and sends child support payments, visits on weekends when his schedule allows? This child deserves better than to be a secret, inconvenient part of Jackson Montgomery's carefully curated life." "You don't know what he'll do," Maya pointed out. "Maybe this will change everything." Eleanor wasn't so sure. The Jackson she had fallen in love with, the man who had called himself Jack Moore and shopped in ordinary grocery stores, might have embraced this pregnancy and her. But Jackson Montgomery, heir to billions, pressured by family expectations and business considerations, that man had already shown he wasn't strong enough to choose love over duty. Still, Maya was right about one thing. He deserved to know. Eleanor tried calling Jackson's private number, the one few people had, but it went straight to voicemail. She left a simple message asking him to call her back on an important matter, but heard nothing for days. Meanwhile, across town, Jackson was locked in meetings with lawyers and business advisors, the Preston merger consuming all his time. He had seen Eleanor's call but hadn't had a moment alone to return it. And truthfully, he wasn't sure what he would say if he did. He had made his decision to break things off with Vivian, but he hadn't yet taken any concrete steps. The engagement party, scheduled for the following week, loomed over him like a sword. His mother had arranged everything, inviting 300 of their closest friends and business associates to celebrate the union that would cement the Montgomery-Preston alliance. Jackson knew he needed to act before then, to speak with Vivian and his parents, but the right moment never seemed to present itself. Harold Preston was constantly at his side, discussing integration plans for their companies. Vivian had taken to dropping by his office unannounced, marking her territory with casual touches and knowing smiles. And then there was the media attention. Photographers followed them everywhere, capturing every dinner, every handhold, constructing a narrative of romance and destiny that bore little resemblance to the cold, strategic arrangement Jackson knew it to be. It was during this chaotic time that Eleanor made a discovery that pushed her to more drastic action. While scrolling through news updates on her phone, she saw the announcement, "Montgomery-Preston engagement party set for Saturday, wedding of the year expected to follow." The article included a quote from Victoria Montgomery. "We couldn't be happier to welcome Vivian into our family. She and Jackson are perfect for each other." Eleanor felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Despite everything, some part of her had still hoped that Jackson might choose differently, might fight for what they had shared. Now it seemed that hope had been in vain. With the engagement party just days away, Eleanor knew she had to act. Jackson needed to know about the baby before he committed himself publicly to another woman. He deserved that choice, at least. She tried calling again, left messages, even sent an email to his private address, but received no response. Whether he was deliberately avoiding her or simply overwhelmed with preparations, the result was the same: silence. In desperation, Eleanor did something she had never imagined herself doing. She called the main Montgomery corporate office, identifying herself as having urgent personal business with Jackson. The receptionist, clearly used to filtering out unwanted calls, politely but firmly refused to put her through. "Mr. Montgomery is unavailable for personal calls this week due to the upcoming engagement celebration," the woman said, her voice professionally detached. "Perhaps you could send a card or gift to the corporate address?" Eleanor hung up, frustrated and increasingly angry. The father of her child was being walled off from her by layers of privilege and protocol. Every attempt at private, dignified communication had failed. There seemed to be only one option left. She would have to go to the engagement party itself. It was a drastic step, one that would expose her to public scrutiny and potential humiliation. But what choice did she have? This wasn't just about her anymore, or even about her and Jackson. It was about their child, who deserved to have both parents make informed decisions about the future. Using her financial industry contacts, Eleanor managed to learn the location of the party, the Grand Ballroom at the Westfield Hotel, the most exclusive venue in the city. Security would be tight, the guest list carefully controlled, but Eleanor was determined. She found a simple but elegant black dress in her closet, applied her makeup with care, and tucked the ultrasound photo into her purse. As she prepared to crash the engagement party of the year, Eleanor tried to steel herself for what lay ahead. Best-case scenario, Jackson would hear her out privately, learn about the baby, and make whatever decision he felt was right. Worst case, she would be publicly humiliated, possibly arrested for trespassing, and have to raise her child alone while being painted as a homewrecker by the media. Either way, after tonight, nothing would ever be the same. And so it came to pass that Eleanor Rhodes stood in the doorway of the Grand Ballroom, feeling every eye in the room turned toward her as conversations faltered, and whispers began. Across the room, Jackson stared at her in disbelief, while Vivian Preston's perfectly manicured hand tightened possessively on his arm. "Eleanor," Jackson said, finally reaching her as the security guards hovered uncertainly nearby. "What are you doing here?" Victoria Montgomery appeared at his side, her smile fixed but her eyes blazing with anger. "Jackson, this is completely inappropriate. Your guests." "Need a moment?" Jackson finished firmly, not taking his eyes off Eleanor. Eleanor stood her ground, ignoring the stares and whispers. "I need to speak with you privately, Jackson. It's important." "Whatever you have to say can wait," Victoria hissed, signaling to the security guards. "Remove this woman immediately." Before the guards could move, Jackson stepped between them and Eleanor. "No one is removing anyone," he said, his voice carrying enough authority that the guards hesitated. "Mother, please give us a moment. I'll handle this." Victoria's lips thinned into a tight line, but years of social training prevented her from causing a scene. "5 minutes, Jackson. Then I expect you back at your fiancé's side where you belong." As his mother walked away, Jackson gently took Eleanor's elbow and guided her toward a small antechamber off the main ballroom. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes following them, including Vivian's icy stare. Once they were alone, Jackson closed the door and turned to Eleanor, a mix of emotions crossing his face: concern, confusion, and something that looked almost like relief. "Eleanor, what's going on? Why are you here?" Eleanor took a deep breath, her hand instinctively moving to her purse where the ultrasound photo rested. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. You haven't returned my calls or emails." "I've been swamped with the merger preparations," Jackson said, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I was going to call you back, but you were too busy planning your engagement party," Eleanor finished for him. The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. Jackson had the grace to look ashamed. "It's not what you think. I never meant for things to go this far with Vivian. My family pushed and the media ran with it, and before I knew it, we were being called the next great power couple." "And you just went along with it?" Eleanor asked quietly. "No. Yes. I don't know." Jackson paced the small room. "I've been trying to find a way out that doesn't destroy everything my family has built. The Preston merger is worth billions, Eleanor. Thousands of jobs depend on it. But I don't love Vivian. I never have." Eleanor's heart quickened at his words, but she forced herself to stay focused on why she had come. "Jackson, I'm not here to disrupt your life or make demands. I'm here because you have a right to know something before you commit to marrying someone else." She reached into her purse and pulled out the envelope containing the ultrasound image. With slightly trembling hands, she passed it to him. "What's this?" he asked, taking the envelope. "Open it." Jackson opened the envelope and pulled out the black and white image. For a moment, he stared at it uncomprehendingly. Then his eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You're pregnant?" he whispered, looking up at her with shock. Eleanor nodded. 8 weeks. It's yours, Jackson. I haven't been with anyone else." Jackson sank into a nearby chair, still holding the ultrasound image. "A baby," he said, his voice filled with wonder and confusion.
"We're having a baby."
"I am having a baby," Eleanor corrected gently. "What you do is up to you. I didn't come here to trap you or force your hand. I just thought you should know before you married someone else." Jackson stood suddenly, moving toward her with purpose. "Eleanor, this changes everything." Before she could respond, the door burst open and Victoria Montgomery swept in, her patience evidently exhausted. "Your 5 minutes are up, Jackson. Your fiancé is wondering where you've gone, and the Hendersons are asking to toast your engagement." Her eyes narrowed as she took in the scene before her, Jackson holding the ultrasound image, standing close to Eleanor. With the instincts of a predator sensing weakness, Victoria honed in on the photo in her son's hand. "What is that?" she demanded, snatching it from him before he could react. She glanced at it, then looked up sharply at Eleanor. "Is this some kind of joke? Some pathetic attempt to trap my son?" "Mother!" Jackson's voice was low with warning. "That's enough." But Victoria was beyond listening. Years of carefully laid plans were threatening to unravel before her eyes. "Do you honestly think you're the first woman to try this trick? To get pregnant in the hopes of securing a piece of the Montgomery fortune?" Eleanor felt her face flush with anger and humiliation. "I don't want your money, Mrs. Montgomery. I came to tell Jackson because he deserves to know, not because I expect anything from him or your family." Victoria laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "How noble. And I suppose you dragged yourself to our engagement party out of pure altruism as well, creating a spectacle, embarrassing our family in front of our friends and business associates?" "I tried calling," Eleanor said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I tried emailing. No one would let me through to him." "Because we protect our own from gold diggers and opportunists," Victoria snapped. "Jackson, we need to handle this quietly. I know an excellent doctor who can verify the paternity, and if necessary, arrange a suitable settlement." The clinical way Victoria discussed her grandchild made Jackson physically recoil. In that moment, he saw his mother clearly for perhaps the first Timino as the protective matriarch she pretended to be, but as a calculating, controlling woman who viewed people as either assets or liabilities. "There will be no handling of this situation, Mother," Jackson said firmly. "Eleanor is carrying my child, your grandchild, and you will show her the respect she deserves." Victoria's eyes widened at his tone. "You can't possibly be considering acknowledging this situation publicly. Think of Vivian, think of the merger." "I am thinking," Jackson replied. "For the first time in years, I'm thinking clearly." He turned to Eleanor, his eyes softening. "I was going to end things with Vivian anyway. That's why I've been so distracted this week. I couldn't go through with it. Couldn't marry someone I don't love while the woman I do love is out there." Eleanor's breath caught. "You still love me?" "I never stopped," Jackson said, taking her hands in his. "I was just too much of a coward to fight for what I wanted, but no more." Victoria made a sound of exasperation. "This is absurd! Jackson, you're throwing away everything we've built." "The Prestons won't proceed with the merger if you humiliate their daughter this way." "Then we'll find another way to make the merger work," Jackson replied without looking at his mother. "Or we won't. Either way, I'm not marrying Vivian." "Your father will never stand for this," Victoria warned, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Jackson finally turned to her, his expression resolute. "Then that's his choice to make, just as this is mine." He led Eleanor toward the door, his hand firmly holding hers. "We're leaving now, Mother. You can make whatever excuses you think best to the guests." Victoria blocked their path, her face pale with fury. "If you walk out that door with her, you're choosing to turn your back on this family and everything it stands for." Jackson paused, looking at his mother with a mixture of sadness and determination. "No, Mother. I'm choosing to start my own family, with the woman I love." With that, he guided Eleanor past Victoria and back toward the main ballroom. A hush fell over the crowd as they entered, hand in hand. Jackson spotted Vivian watching them, her expression a mixture of shock and fury. He led Eleanor directly toward Vivian, knowing he owed her the courtesy of a direct explanation, however painful it might be. "Vivian," he began quietly, "I'm sorry, but I can't go through with this engagement." Vivian's eyes flicked from Jackson to Eleanor, understanding dawning in her expression. "It's her, isn't it? The woman you've been seeing on the side." She didn't wait for confirmation before continuing, her voice razor sharp. "How utterly cliché, Jackson. Throwing away a perfect match for a fling." "It's not a fling," Jackson replied evenly. I love her. And she's pregnant with my child? A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as those closest to them overheard his words. Vivian's face flushed with embarrassment and rage. You bastard, she hissed. You let this charade go on, let me believe we had a future, while you were busy impregnating your mistress. Eleanor flinched at the word mistress, but Jackson squeezed her hand reassuringly. I'm sorry, Vivian. You deserve better than a loveless marriage built on business interests. We both do. Without waiting for her response, Jackson led Eleanor through the stunned crowd toward the exit. Photographers who had been invited to document the celebration now frantically snapped pictures of what would surely be the scandal of the year. As they reached the door, Jackson's father stepped into their path, his face grim. Think carefully about what you're doing, son, Robert Montgomery said, his voice low but carrying enough authority to make Jackson pause. There will be consequences. Jackson met his father's gaze steadily. I know, but for the first time in my life, I'm doing what feels right, not what looks good on a balance sheet. Robert's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes' respect, perhaps, or at least recognition of his son's resolve. We'll talk tomorrow, he said finally, stepping aside to let them pass. As Jackson and Eleanor stepped out into the cool night air, leaving behind the whispers and stares, Eleanor felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Whatever came next wouldn't be easy, but at least there would be no more secrets, no more hiding. Are you sure about this? She asked as they walked toward Jackson's car. You've just burned a lot of bridges back there. Jackson stopped, turning to face her fully under the streetlight. The only thing I'm sure about is that I love you, Eleanor Rhodes, and I want to build a life with you and our child. Everything else, the business, my family, the media storm that's about to hit us, we'll figure it out together. He pulled her close, kissing her with all the pent-up longing of their weeks apart. Eleanor melted into his embrace, finally allowing herself to believe that perhaps their love was strong enough after all. What neither of them noticed, in their moment of reunion, was Jackson's sister Emma watching from the hotel entrance, a small smile playing at her lips as she witnessed her brother's act of defiance. Nor did they see Robert Montgomery holding back Victoria as she attempted to follow them, his face thoughtful as he considered his son's unexpected show of backbone. The engagement party of the year had turned into something entirely different, the beginning of a new Montgomery legacy, one built on love rather than strategic alliances. And as Jackson and Eleanor drove away from the glittering hotel, neither of them could have predicted just how that legacy would unfold. The headline dominated every news outlet the next morning: Montgomery here leaves Preston Harris for pregnant girlfriend. Beneath it, photos of Jackson and Eleanor leaving the engagement party hand in hand, looking determined despite the chaos behind them. Eleanor groaned as she scrolled through the news on her phone, curled up in Jackson's penthouse. They're calling me a homewrecker and worse. Your mother must be having a field day with this. Jackson set 2 mugs of coffee on the table before joining her on the couch. My mother will survive, and so will we. The news cycle will move on to something else soon enough. Easy for you to say, Eleanor sighed. You're the billionaire playboy having a crisis of conscience. I'm the gold-digging temptress who lured you away from your perfect match. Jackson winced. I'm sorry about all that. I should have handled things better from the start. We both should have, Eleanor admitted, setting down her phone. But what's done is done. The question is, where do we go from here? Before Jackson could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. It's my father. Eleanor squeezed his hand. You should talk to him. Jackson nodded and accepted the call, putting it on speaker. Father. Jackson! Robert Montgomery's voice filled the room, calm and controlled, as always. I assume you've seen the headlines. We have. Good. Then you understand the position you've put this family in. The Prestons have already announced they're reconsidering the merger. Our stock dropped 7 points in pre-market trading. Jackson ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry about the business implications, Father, but I'm not sorry about my decision. There was a pause before Robert spoke again. Your mother is beside herself. She's talking about cutting you off completely. Is that why you're calling? To deliver the ultimatum? Jackson asked, his voice tight. Another pause.
No.
Robert's tone shifted slightly. I'm calling to invite you and Ms. Rhodes to dinner tonight. At the house. Your mother will be there, along with Emma. I think it's time we all talked properly. Jackson and Eleanor exchanged surprised glances. We'll be there, Jackson said finally. After the call ended, Eleanor looked at Jackson with concern. Are you sure this is a good idea? Your mother made her feelings about me pretty clear last night. My father wouldn't have invited you if he didn't want to at least try to find a way forward, Jackson reasoned. He's a businessman to his core. When one strategy fails, he adapts. And I'm the new reality he needs to adapt to, Eleanor said dryly. We both are, Jackson corrected, pulling her close. We're a package deal now. That evening, as their car approached the Montgomery estate, Eleanor felt her anxiety mounting. She had dressed carefully in a simple but elegant navy dress that accommodated her still flat stomach while looking professional and appropriate. Remember, Jackson said as they pulled up to the massive house, my father may seem intimidating, but he respects strength and authenticity. Just be yourself. The self that crashed his son's engagement party? Eleanor asked with a nervous laugh. Jackson smiled. The self I fell in love with. Strong, principled, and unwilling to settle for less than you deserve. Emma greeted them at the door, giving her brother a fierce hug before turning to Eleanor with a warm smile. So you're the woman who finally made my brother grow a spine, she said, offering her hand. I've been dying to meet you. Eleanor shook her hand, immediately liking Jackson's straightforward sister. I think he always had a spine. He just needed a reason to use it. Emma laughed. I like her already, Jack. She led them into the formal dining room, where Robert and Victoria Montgomery were already seated. Victoria's face remained impassive, though the tightness around her mouth betrayed her displeasure. Robert stood as they entered, extending his hand first to his son, then to Eleanor. Ms. Rhodes, he said, his voice neutral but not unfriendly. Welcome to our home. Thank you for having me, Mr. Montgomery, Eleanor replied, meeting his gaze directly. Dinner began in awkward silence, with Emma heroically attempting to maintain conversation while Victoria picked at her food, and Robert observed everyone with calculated interest. Finally, after the main course had been cleared, Robert set down his wine glass and addressed the elephant in the room. So, Ms. Rhodes, he began, Jackson tells me you work in financial advising. Eleanor nodded. I do. I specialize in helping middle-income families develop sustainable investment strategies. Admirable, Robert said, and she was surprised to detect genuine approval in his tone. Many of those families become the backbone of firms like ours. Victoria made a small sound of derision. Hardly the same league as managing billion-dollar portfolios. No, Eleanor agreed calmly, but perhaps more challenging in some ways. These families don't have safety nets. One bad investment can mean the difference between sending a child to college or not. The stakes feel very real when you're working with people's dreams, not just their dollars. Robert's eyebrows rose slightly at her response. An interesting perspective. And your family, Ms. Rhodes? My father was a high school math teacher. He passed away when I was in college. My mother is a nurse. My younger sister is finishing her degree in engineering with my help. So you understand responsibility to family, Robert noted. Eleanor met his gaze. I do, but I also understand that true family supports each other's happiness, not just their ambitions. The subtle rebuke hung in the air. Victoria's lips thinned, but Robert actually smiled slightly. "And now you're expanding your family," he said, glancing at her stomach. "We are," Jackson interjected, reaching for Eleanor's hand. "And I want our child to know their grandparents, all of them. But that depends on your ability to accept Eleanor as my choice, as the woman I love." Victoria set down her fork with a clatter. "This is absurd. You've known this woman for what, a year? The Montgomerys have spent generations building alliances with the right families, maintaining our position. And you want to throw it all away for a fling that resulted in an inconvenient pregnancy?" "Mother," Emma warned, but Eleanor raised a hand to stop her. "Mrs. Montgomery," Eleanor said quietly but firmly, "I understand your disappointment. Jackson represents everything you've worked for, everything you value. And I'm not what you envisioned for him. But I love your son. Not his name, not his money, not his position. Just him. And if you give me a chance, I think you'll find I have more to offer your family than you might expect." Victoria didn't respond, but Robert studied Eleanor with new interest. "The Prestons have officially pulled out of the merger," he said abruptly, turning to Jackson. "Harold called this afternoon." Jackson nodded, having expected as much. "I'm sorry about that, Father. I know how much work went into it." "Yes, well," Robert took a sip of his wine. "It turns out there were some issues with their patent claims that might have caused problems down the line anyway. Our legal team discovered them last week." Jackson's eyes widened slightly at this revelation. "You knew before the engagement party?" "I did," Robert confirmed. "I was going to discuss it with you privately afterward. The merger wasn't as advantageous as it initially appeared." Victoria looked stunned. "Robert, you never said." "Because you were so set on the match," Robert replied, giving his wife a pointed look. "Sometimes, Victoria, business decisions and personal decisions need to be evaluated separately." He turned back to Jackson and Eleanor. "Which brings me to my proposition. Ms. Rhodes, I understand you have experience helping families navigate complex financial situations. Would you be interested in developing a program within Montgomery Financial that focuses on middle-income investment strategies? We've been looking to expand in that sector, and your perspective could be valuable." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Montgomery?" "I'm suggesting a partnership," Robert clarified. "Your own division, with appropriate resources. You'd report directly to the board, not to Jackson or me. Your success or failure would be entirely your own." Jackson looked at his father with newfound respect. "That's unexpectedly progressive of you, Father." Robert shrugged. "The world is changing. Our clients are changing. Perhaps it's time the Montgomery approach changed as well." He fixed Eleanor with a direct gaze. "Of course, there would be conditions, a proper engagement period, a prenuptial agreement that protects core family assets while being fair to you and your child. And yes, Victoria will require time to adjust." Victoria's face had gone from shocked to calculating as she processed her husband's unexpected pivot. Always quick to align herself with power, she sensed the shifting dynamics. "The prenup is non-negotiable," she said, her tone slightly less hostile. "And I would expect Eleanor to work with our event planner for any public appearances." Eleanor fought back a smile at Victoria's transparent attempt to maintain control. "I understand tradition, Mrs. Montgomery. I'm not here to dismantle your family legacy, only to become part of it on my own terms." Emma raised her glass. "I think this calls for a toast to new beginnings and unexpected alliances." As they clinked glasses, Eleanor felt Jackson's hand squeeze hers under the table. They had a long road ahead, but the first tentative bridge had been built. Later that night, as they drove back to Jackson's penthouse, Eleanor finally allowed herself to relax. "That went better than expected," she admitted. "Your father is not what I imagined." Jackson smiled. My father is a businessman first and foremost. He recognizes value when he sees it, and he saw it in you tonight. And your mother? Will come around eventually, especially when the baby arrives. She'll be unable to resist showing off her grandchild to her society friends. Eleanor laughed, then grew serious. Are you okay with the conditions? The prenup? The engagement period? Jackson pulled the car over and turned to face her fully. Eleanor, I would agree to far more difficult terms for the chance to build a life with you. But there's one condition that hasn't been discussed yet. What's that? Jackson reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Whether you'll actually agree to marry me? Eleanor's breath caught as he opened the box, to reveal a stunning but tasteful emerald. Ring not the massive diamond she might have expected from a Montgomery proposal. It was my grandmother's, Jackson explained. The only Montgomery who married for love rather than advantage. My father gave it to me tonight before we left. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. Your father gave you this? Jackson nodded. He said, some traditions are worth preserving, and some are worth creating. So, Eleanor Rhodes, will you help me create a new Montgomery tradition? One built on love, partnership, and mutual respect? Yes, Eleanor whispered, allowing him to slip the ring onto her finger, but on one condition of my own. Name it, Jackson said, pressing his forehead against hers. That we raise our child to know they come from both worlds your privilege and my perspective. That they understand both the value of a dollar and the responsibility of wealth. That they're as comfortable in my mother's modest home as they are in your family's mansion. Jackson smiled, placing a gentle hand on her stomach. I wouldn't have it any other way. 6 months later, the Montgomery Foundation's annual gala was in full swing. The city's elite gathered to support causes ranging from education initiatives to healthcare access programs. But this year's event had a different energy, largely due to the woman standing at the center of it all. Eleanor Montgomery, now 5 months pregnant and glowing in an elegant emerald gown designed to accommodate her growing bump, moved through the crowd with natural grace. Her newly launched middle-income investment initiative had exceeded all expectations, bringing in clients who had never before considered themselves worthy of Montgomery Financial's attention. Jackson watched with pride as Eleanor chatted with a group of community college leaders about scholarship funding, her passion evident in her animated gestures. She's quite remarkable, Robert Montgomery said, appearing at his son's side. The board is impressed with her program's results. 20% growth in the first quarter alone. I told you she was special, Jackson replied. Robert nodded. You did. I should have listened sooner. He paused, sipping his scotch. Your mother has been telling everyone she discovered Eleanor at a charity function. Apparently, she immediately saw her potential and introduced her to you. Jackson choked back a laugh. Of course she has. Victoria Montgomery had indeed undergone a remarkable transformation once she realized Eleanor wasn't going away. After initial resistance, she had pivoted to taking credit for the match, rewriting history in a way that positioned her as the visionary who had seen Eleanor's potential all along. Let her have her story, Jackson said. Eleanor finds it amusing. Across the room, Emma approached Eleanor, rescuing her from an overly persistent board member. My hero, Eleanor said with a grateful smile as Emma led her toward the refreshment table. My sister-in-law deserves a break, Emma replied warmly. Besides, I wanted to check on my future niece or nephew. Surprisingly good, Eleanor said, though your brother insists on asking me if I need to sit down approximately every 5 minutes. Emma laughed. He's always been a worrier, but it's nice to see him worry about something that actually matters for a change. As they chatted, Eleanor noticed Vivian Preston enter the ballroom with her new fiancé, the heir to a shipping fortune. The Preston merger with Montgomery had fallen through, but Vivian had landed on her feet as people like her always did. Their eyes met briefly across the room. Vivian's gaze flicked to Eleanor's pregnant belly, then to the emerald ring on her finger. After a moment of hesitation, she gave a small, acknowledging nod before turning away. "Well, that's progress," Emma noted, having witnessed the exchange. Eleanor smiled. "This world is too small for permanent enemies. Besides, she did me a favor in the end." "How do you figure?" "She showed me exactly what kind of life I didn't want, based on arrangements rather than love. And she showed Jackson what he was willing to walk away from to be with me. That's quite a gift, when you think about it." Their conversation was interrupted as Jackson appeared, sliding an arm around Eleanor's waist. "Everything okay?" he asked, his hand automatically moving to rest protectively over her belly. "Perfect," Eleanor assured him. "Just enjoying a moment with my favorite Montgomery sibling." Emma grinned. "I'm telling the baby you said that." As the evening progressed, Eleanor found herself stepping out onto the balcony for a moment of quiet. The city lights sparkled below, a beautiful tapestry of possibility. So much had changed in a year. She had gone from a financial advisor in a small firm to heading her own division at Montgomery Financial, from a woman in love with a man who called himself Jack Moore to the wife-to-be of Jackson Montgomery, from someone who had always been alone to part of a family that, despite its complications, had ultimately welcomed her. She felt the baby kick and placed her hand over the spot, smiling. "There you are," Jackson's voice came from behind her. "I've been looking everywhere." "Just needed some air," she said as he joined her at the railing. "Your mother has been introducing me as my brilliant daughter-in-law, who's revolutionizing our approach to community investment to anyone who will listen." Jackson laughed. "She's certainly embraced her new narrative." "I don't mind," Eleanor admitted. "It's better than the alternative. And she's been surprisingly helpful with the wedding planning." Their wedding was set for the following month, a compromise between Victoria's desire for a lavish society affair and Eleanor's preference for simplicity. They had settled on an elegant but intimate ceremony with both families and close friends, followed by a larger reception that would satisfy the social obligations of the Montgomery name. "Any regrets?" Jackson asked, studying her face in the moonlight. Eleanor considered the question seriously. "About us? Never. About how we got here?" She sighed. "I wish we could have avoided hurting people along the way, but I don't regret fighting for what we have." Jackson pulled her close, his hand resting on her growing belly, where their child kicked energetically. "I spent my whole life trying to be what my family wanted, following the path they laid out. It took meeting you to realize I had no idea who I actually was, or what I wanted. And now? Now I know exactly who I am and what I want." He kissed her softly. "I'm the man who loves you, Eleanor, the future father of our child. Everything else the Montgomery name, the business, the wealth, that's just circumstance. You and this baby are my choice." Eleanor leaned into him, feeling the solid strength of the man she had come to love even more deeply over the past months. Their journey hadn't been easy, and there would be challenges ahead. They came from different worlds, with different perspectives and experiences, but their differences had become their strength, each complementing the other in ways that made them both better. "We should get back inside," she said after a moment. "Your mother will send out a search party if the guests of honor are missing for too long." Jackson smiled. "Let her wait. I'm exactly where I need to be." As they stood together overlooking the city that had brought them together, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace. She had crashed an engagement party, faced down the formidable Victoria Montgomery, and carved out a place for herself in a world that had initially tried to exclude her. And in doing so, she had not only found love, but had helped Jackson find the courage to choose his own path. His family had chosen the perfect bride, someone who looked right, said the right things, came from the right background, But Jackson had chosen love instead, and that had made all the difference. 1 year later, the nursery was quiet, except for the soft lullaby playing from a speaker and the occasional contented gurgle from the crib. Eleanor stood in the doorway, watching as Jackson gently rocked their 3-month-old daughter, Olivia Maya Montgomery, named for both their mothers. "Is she finally asleep?" Eleanor whispered. Jackson nodded, carefully laying the baby in her crib, out like a light. "She fought it hard, though. Definitely has her mother's determination." Eleanor smiled, leaning against him as they both gazed down at their daughter. Olivia had Jackson's striking blue eyes, but Eleanor's warm brown skin and curly hair. She was, as Victoria had proudly proclaimed to her friends, the most beautiful Montgomery in generations. The past year had brought more changes than either of them could have imagined. Their wedding had made headlines, but for all the right reasons, the business world had been impressed by the modern, inclusive approach the Montgomerys were taking under the next generation's leadership. Eleanor's division had continued to thrive, bringing financial services to communities that had long been overlooked by institutions like Montgomery Financial. And most surprisingly, Victoria had become Olivia's most devoted grandmother, showing up unannounced with designer baby clothes and educational toys, insisting on babysitting duties, and even attending a new mother's support group with Eleanor to provide moral support. As they tiptoed out of the nursery, careful not to wake their sleeping daughter, Jackson pulled Eleanor close. "Happy?" he asked, searching her face. Eleanor thought about the question. They lived in a beautiful home, not his penthouse or the Montgomery estate, but a place they had chosen together. She had work that fulfilled her, a husband who loved and respected her, and a daughter who embodied the best of both their worlds. Her mother and sister were regular visitors, as were Jackson's parents and Emma. They had created something new together, something that honored their different backgrounds while building a shared future. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "You? More than I ever thought possible," Jackson said. "You know, my mother said something interesting last week." "That's always concerning," Eleanor teased. Jackson laughed softly. "She said that in trying to choose the perfect bride for me, she never considered that perfection might look different than what she imagined. That sometimes the right choice isn't about pedigree or background, but about who brings out the best in you." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Victoria Montgomery said that?" "I was as shocked as you are. I think Olivia has softened her considerably. Or maybe she's just seen how happy we are," Eleanor suggested. "How much stronger we are together than we would have been apart." Jackson nodded, leading her toward their bedroom. "I think you're right. You gave me the courage to choose my own path, Eleanor, to stand up for what I wanted instead of what was expected of me. And you gave me the confidence to believe I belonged anywhere I chose to be," Eleanor replied, "even in a world that wasn't designed for people like me." As they prepared for bed, Eleanor caught a glimpse of them in the bedroom mirror. Jackson in his t-shirt and pajama pants, looking nothing like the polished heir to a fortune who had first captured her heart, and herself in one of his old shirts, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. They looked like any other tired but happy new parents. And yet, they were so much more to people from different worlds who had found in each other exactly what they needed. "I love you, Eleanor Montgomery," Jackson said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Eleanor leaned back against him, savoring the warmth and safety she felt in his embrace. "I love you too, Jackson Montgomery." In the nursery down the hall, their daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the boundaries her parents had crossed to bring her into the world. She would grow up knowing both privilege and perspective, understanding both the power of wealth and the richness of diversity. She was living proof that sometimes the most perfect choice isn't the one society or family dictates, but the one the heart recognizes as true. And in the end, that was all that mattered.